They thought my wedding day would go smoothly until I uncovered my stepfather's secret. My name is Mary Thompson, and I've spent most of my life in a small coastal town in South Carolina. It's the kind of place where the ocean breeze slips through your open windows, carrying the faint scent of salt water and wildflowers from the dunes. I share a modest beachside cottage with my mother, Linda, my younger sister, Ashley, and my stepfather, Robert. That summer afternoon, the sun was blazing, painting the white sand in a warm golden glow. Ashley was stretched out on the front porch, scrolling endlessly on her phone. Mom was in the kitchen making her famous blueberry cobbler, the one she always baked on lazy Sundays. Robert sat in the recliner, sipping sweet tea and pretending to read the newspaper, though his eyes kept wandering to the baseball game on the muted TV. I had just finished rinsing the sand off my feet after a long walk by the shore when I noticed Robert watching me a little too intently. It wasn't the first time I'd caught that look, but I brushed it off, telling myself I was imagining things. Still, something about his gaze made my skin crawl. When Ashley laughed at something on her phone, Robert snapped at her for being too loud. Mom gave him a sharp look, but she didn't say anything. The air felt heavier, like a storm brewing out at sea. I decided to break the tension. Ashley, want to help me set the table? Before she could answer, Robert slammed his hand down on the armrest. And no one tells me what to do in my own house, he barked. I froze, unsure what had triggered his outburst. Then, in a sudden, shocking move, he stood up, walked over, and slapped me across the face. The sting burned, but what hurt more was the way Mom's eyes widened, full of fear, but also something else. Guilt. That was the moment I knew something was deeply wrong in our family. I stood there, my cheek throbbing, my hand instinctively pressing against it. Ashley's phone slipped from her fingers, hitting the wooden porch floor with a dull thud. Her eyes darted between me and Robert, disbelief written all over her face. "Robert!" Mom's voice cracked, sharp yet trembling. She stepped between us, her hands raised like a shield. "What on earth is wrong with you?" Robert didn't answer. He just stared at me, his jaw tight, breathing heavy. Then, with a muttered curse, he turned and stormed out the front door, slamming it so hard the windows rattled. The house went silent, except for the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. I could still hear my own pulse pounding in my ears. "Mary?" Mom's voice was softer now, almost broken. She reached for me, but I stepped back. "I should have told you this a long time ago." Ashley and I exchanged a confused glance. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Robert isn't just your stepfather. He was once my high school sweetheart." She swallowed hard, her voice faltering. "Back then, we were young, reckless. We dated for a while, then broke up. I never told you because—" She stopped, as if the next words were too heavy to speak. I felt my stomach twist. "Because what, Mom?" She took a deep breath, tears rolling freely now. "Yes," Mom cut in, her voice breaking. "Robert may be more connected to this family than either of you realize." The weight of her words pressed down on me like the humid summer air, suffocating and sticky. I didn't know what hurt more, the sting on my cheek or the cracks suddenly appearing in the foundation of my family. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay in bed listening to the faint hum of the ceiling fan, replaying Mom's words over and over. Every creak in the house felt louder, every shadow sharper. The man who just struck me, the man I'd always called my stepfather, was now tied to us in ways I couldn't begin to untangle. The next morning, Robert didn't come home. Mom sat at the kitchen table, still in her robe, her coffee untouched. She stared into the steam as if it might give her the answer she'd been avoiding for decades. "I can't live like this anymore," she finally said. Her voice was steadier now, almost resolute. "I'm filing for divorce." Ashley and I exchanged glances. We'd seen Mom endure too much over the years. Snide remarks, unpredictable tempers, and now violence. Maybe she'd reached her breaking point. The days that followed were tense and oddly quiet. Robert came by once to pick up some of his things. He didn't speak to me. He didn't look at me. Just moved through the house like a ghost, gathering his belongings and leaving without a word. When the papers were signed, Mom sold the beachside cottage. It felt strange watching our furniture loaded into a moving truck, the walls bare and echoing. This was the only home I'd really known, and yet I couldn't get away fast enough. We moved inland to a small rental house on the outskirts of Charleston. It wasn't much, a 2-bedroom with creaky floors and a tiny front porch, but it was ours. There was no ocean breeze here, no sound of gulls overhead, just the faint smell of pine and the low hum of cicadas in the heat. For the first time in a long time, there was also peace. Life in Charleston was different, quieter, slower, and somehow safer. Mom took a job at a small bakery downtown, the kind that smelled of fresh cinnamon rolls before sunrise. Ashley started her senior year at the local high school, making friends faster than I expected. As for me, I needed to find work. I'd always loved the ocean, so when I saw a help wanted sign in the window of a coastal gift shop near the pier, I walked in and applied on the spot. The store sold seashell wind chimes, hand-painted mugs, and postcards of sunsets over the harbor. It felt like a small slice of the old life I'd left behind, only without the shadows. My first few weeks there were simple. Stocking shelves, ringing up customers, and sweeping sand off the wooden floorboards. The owner, Mrs. Caldwell, was a kind woman in her 60s who treated me more like a niece than an employee. She'd often slip me extra muffins from the cafe next door, saying, "You're too skinny for someone working by the water all day." Money was tight, but for the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells at home. Mom and I would sit on the porch in the evenings, sipping sweet tea while Ashley told us stories about our classmates. There was laughter in our house again. Tentative at first, but real. Then one Saturday afternoon, everything shifted. A man walked into the shop, a tourist, judging by the way he scanned the shelves like he was trying to take it all in. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-kissed hair and a warm smile. He was wearing a faded baseball cap and carried himself like someone who belonged outdoors. "Hey there," he said, setting a small jar of seashells on the counter. "You wouldn't happen to know where I can get the best coffee in town, would you?" I didn't know it yet, but That was the moment Michael Carter stepped into my life, and nothing would ever be the same. Michael came back to the shop the next day, this time without buying anything. He just leaned against the counter, holding a paper cup from the coffee place I'd recommended. "You weren't lying," he said with a grin. "Best coffee I've had in a long time." I laughed. "Told you, locals know where the real stuff is." From then on, he became a regular. Sometimes he'd pick up a small souvenir. Other times he'd just chat while I worked. I learned he was a marine biologist working on a short-term research project along the South Carolina coast. He loved fishing at sunrise, hated cold weather, and had a soft spot for stray animals. He'd already rescued a half-starved cat from behind the marina. One rainy afternoon, the shop was nearly empty. Michael lingered by the register, tapping his fingers on the counter. "You know," he said, "I've been meaning to ask, would you like to grab dinner sometime? Maybe somewhere by the water?" My first instinct was hesitation. After everything with Robert, trusting another man felt risky. But there was something steady in Michael's gaze, something that didn't feel like a threat. "Sure," I said, surprising myself. "Dinner sounds nice." That night, we sat on the patio of a small seafood restaurant overlooking the harbor. String lights glowed above us, and the sound of gentle waves mixed with the hum of distant conversation. Michael told stories about tagging sea turtles and diving near coral reefs, his hands moving animately as he spoke. I found myself laughing, really laughing, in a way I hadn't in years. When he walked me home, the summer air was thick with the scent of magnolias. At my front door, he paused. "I'm glad I met you, Mary," he said softly. I didn't say it out loud, but I was glad too. Over the next year, Michael became part of my everyday life. He'd stop by the shop after work, sometimes bringing me a cup of that same coffee he discovered on his first day. On weekends, we'd take long drives along the coast, exploring little fishing towns and hidden beaches most tourists never found. Mom liked him immediately. She said he had honest eyes. Even Ashley, who could be skeptical about anyone new, seemed to approve. She'd tease me about how my face lit up whenever Michael's truck pulled into the driveway. Michael never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He understood my past without needing every detail, and his patience was something I'd never experienced before. One crisp autumn evening, he suggested a walk along the pier. The air smelled faintly of salt and fried seafood from the boardwalk restaurants. The sunset painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges, reflecting on the water like a watercolor painting. As we reached the end of the pier, Michael stopped and turned to face me. His hands were warm as he took mine. "Mary," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You've been through things I can only imagine, but you've come out stronger. I can't promise life will always be easy, but I can promise I'll be here. Always." Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold ring with a single diamond that caught the fading sunlight. "Will you marry me?" My breath caught. For a moment, all I could hear was the gentle lapping of the waves beneath us. And then, without hesitation, I smiled through the tears welling in my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I will." Michael slipped the ring onto my finger, and the crowd at the boardwalk, strangers we'd never met, started clapping and cheering. It felt like the universe was giving us its blessing. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of cake tastings, dress fittings, and late-night Pinterest boards. Mom was helping me sew the final touches on my gown, while Ashley was in charge of organizing the bachelorette party. Michael was busy coordinating with his best man and securing a venue by the harbor. Everything felt like it was falling perfectly into place. Until 3 weeks before the wedding. It was a Thursday evening when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me pick up. "Mary Thompson?" a woman's voice asked, cold and clipped. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Diane Matthews. I'm Robert's sister." The sound of his name made my stomach tighten. "What do you want?" "I think you should know something before you walk down that aisle," she said. "Robert's been talking. He's telling people that Michael isn't the man you think he is." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Robert had been out of my life for years. But then Diane's tone changed, her words slow and deliberate. "He claims Michael knew things about your family long before you met, that your meeting wasn't an accident." My throat dried. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" she pressed. "Ask him about the time he worked with Robert's cousin down in Florida. Ask him why he never told you." I hung up before she could say more, my hands trembling. The idea that Michael might have any connection to Robert was unthinkable, but now the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, I confronted Michael. He froze when I mentioned Robert's cousin, his usual calm demeanor shifting into something guarded. "Mary, it's not what you think," he began, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice. I stepped back, my heart pounding. "Then tell me exactly what it is, Michael. Tell me why you've been hiding it." The silence that followed felt heavier than the humid summer air outside. Michael didn't answer right away. He sat down at the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, running a hand through his hair. "Yes," he finally said, his voice low. "I met Robert's cousin years ago during a marine research project in Florida. He mentioned your family, your mom, your sister, you. But Mary, I swear to you, I had no idea what kind of man Robert was or what he had done. When I met you here, it wasn't some plan. It was fate." I stood there, arms crossed, the words sinking in like stones. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to, but trust was a fragile thing for me. "Why didn't you just tell me from the start?" I asked. "Because I was afraid you'd walk away before you even gave me a chance, and I couldn't stand the thought of losing you over something that had nothing to do with us." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, the wind rustled the magnolia trees, their sweet scent drifting in through the open window. Finally, I sat down beside him. "Michael, I've spent my whole life running from the past. Maybe it's time I stop letting it control me. If you're telling me the truth, really telling me the truth, then we can move forward. But there can't be any more secrets." He nodded, eyes glistening. "No more secrets." The wedding went ahead as planned. On a clear spring afternoon, with the harbor sparkling behind us, I walked down the aisle toward the man I'd chosen. not because he was perfect, but because he was willing to face the hard truths with me. Mom cried through the entire ceremony. Ashley kept slipping me tissues, and even strangers passing by stopped to watch. When Michael and I said our vows, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The past was still part of me, but it no longer defined me. I wasn't the scared girl from the beach house anymore. I was Mary Thompson Carter, wife, survivor, and a woman who had finally learned that love, real love, can survive the truth.
Because in the end, love can survive the truth if you have the courage to face it.